thrusting salute is a defense against an attack entering our quadrants 1 and 4. The word salute signifies the heel palm strike that we will execute to the opponent's chin. The word thrusting suggests the manner in which we will execute that attack. We'll begin by having the opponent attack me with a right step through front kick into my quadrant 4, and then we'll examine some other scenarios that this technique will also work against. Let's take a look. So what happened there? Well, initially here, we're going to set up closed stance with the opponent, meaning our center lines are facing away from each other, so we're both in left neutral bows. And the opponent is firing a right step through front kick to my midsection. And in this scenario, we're going to assume that I feel compelled to move out of the way in this direction, which implies that we're redirecting the attack through our quadrant 4. Reset. So to complete that, I'm going to push drag towards my 430. At the same time, I'm going to execute a downward block. And you notice that my rear hand here, my right hand, orbited to guard my face. From here, I launched off of my rear foot as I simultaneously reversed the orbit of my left hand, forming an outward hand sword, chambering my right hand at my pectoral and executing a right front step through kick to his groin or bladder. And from there, I planted down with marriage of gravity, executing a heel palm strike. It could be to the nose or the chin, with a rear crossover back kick. So I'll do that facing you. So I'm going to push drag, and as I do, I orbit for a downward block while simultaneously orbiting to guard my face. So you can see we have this pattern happening here. Now immediately I launch off of the rear foot as I reverse this orbit into a hand sword, chambering with the rear hand and executing that front kick. It's a little bit off angle here towards 1030, and then finishing with a heel palm utilizing marriage of gravity. Now let me talk for just a moment about this idea of launching. If we forget the rest of the technique, it's going to look like this. So you can see there's no hesitation. The moment I push drag, all this potential energy builds up and I spring or launch off of that rear foot. So in principle, I may not even need to block, right? Even if my hands aren't available to me, I can push drag to get off of the line of his attack and then immediately follow up with my kick. So let's see that one more time. One last time, I'm going to connect and push gently with my kick. So you can see that there really should be some follow through there to push the opponent away from you. Let me perform this technique for you once in the air. When you're executing the heel palm strike, I want you to consider putting a little space between your upper arm and your body, keeping your humerus at a 45-degree angle. And the reason for that is it will involve more of the pectoral muscle, so it should add power, and it will help to prevent shoulder impingement. If you try really hard to keep your arm, your elbow close to your rib cage throughout this motion, it can cause a little discomfort in your shoulder and your back. So altogether it might look like this. And you can see here that once I start initiating the strike here, my arm is away. I don't necessarily want it up here at shoulder height, because that can also cause some shoulder issues when you're doing lots of practice and repetitions. So the ideal here, a strong position to push from, is with the elbow just a little bit lower than shoulder height. Now, that's how the technique is typically presented as a defense against a step through front kick. But what I want us to realize is that this works against any long range attack the opponent may decide to throw at us. So if he's still in his left neutral bow, but instead he decides to fire a right step through punch, I can do the exact same move, because at this point I don't know what he's going to throw. Now, I've declared it here for purposes of instruction, but in a real fight I don't know what the opponent is going to throw. So I'm still going to complete my downward block followed by my outward hand sword here as a extended outward block or check. So let's see what that looks like. So you can see I blocked low and checked high, and I checked high again. And that worked against a punch. Now, you might say, well, Geoff, why didn't you simply just block his punch, right? And it would look like this. If I can predict exactly what he's going to throw before he throws it, then I absolutely would simply block the punch. But sometimes that's easier said than done. So if we block low and check high, followed by another check or outward block, then we cover all of our bases here, quadrants 4 and quadrant 1. Now, what if he happens to have his other foot forward? And now instead of a right step through front kick, it's a left step through front kick, but I still feel compelled, for whatever reason, to move towards my 430 to get off line of the attack. Well, I can still perform thrusting salute. The difference now is that I won't have a clear view of the center line. So instead of kicking his groin, I'll kick his floating ribs. And instead of heel palm striking his chin, I may strike the side of his head, be it his temple or his jaw. You can see that the same technique worked. What if now it was a left step through punch? Again, the targets are the same, floating ribs and the temple or the jaw. What if he's in a left neutral and it happens to be a jab? What if he's in a left neutral and it happens to be a boxer style pivot punch? So, as you can see, the technique is incredibly versatile, and it allows us to focus in on just a couple of moves, namely this one, thrusting salute, and another technique that we will see later on called detour from doom. And with these two techniques, we can address any long-range attack the opponent may throw at us. And I'm using this on-guard position. It's not our typical open hand position that we use in our empty-handed defenses against kicks and punches or club attacks. But you can see here that I've got my back rounded, my elbows are touching, and I've got what are essentially two outward hooking parries, or what could be called a butterfly parry. And so we're utilizing this as a meat shield because it's too difficult to anticipate and karate block or parry any sort of attack the opponent might do. In a controlled training environment, we can do drills and parries and look really fancy, but in real life, if the opponent is a maniac stabbing us in all sorts of ways, it's really not a matter of can we stop him. The only thing that we might really have a say in is where do we allow ourselves to get stabbed. And so here I'm using my arms as essentially a meat shield. And as he attacks, I'm going to push drag here towards 430. So I'm going to be channeling the technique thrusting salute. And as I do, I'm going to rotate my meat shield to intercept the knife if it gets too close. I'm going to launch off of this rear foot into my front kick. If I have my left foot forward, I'm push dragging like thrusting salute, still keeping a clear view of the center line for the front kick. Make him stagger away. Now, at this point, the safest, smartest thing to do might be to continue kicking as hard and as fast as you can, up into the face, into the ribs, into the groin, side kicks to the knee, right? So you really want to think twice before you start engaging and wrestling with the knife, or for the knife, because you can see here, what do I have to do? I have to expose myself. If at this last moment he lunges at me again with the knife, right, and I miscalculate, I've got a big opening here. If I had left my arms where they were, I at least would have suffered only a stab here to my arm. So ideally, practically, your technique might just be moving out of the way and then firing a series of kicks. Now let's take a look at thrusting salute as a defense against a club attack. Here we're going to consider a relatively short weapon, and we're going to have the opponent stepping through with his attack. And when you're guarding against a stick, you may not necessarily want to deliver a block, either the downward block or an outward knife hand, because if you get hit by the stick, that's going to hurt. And so you may just use an evasive maneuver and keep your hands close to your body. So what would that look like? Like that. And you can see, I won't move here, you swing slowly here. I'm well within range of his attack, and even if I push drag out of range, I can still easily land my front kick. So the reach advantage that the opponent gets with the weapon is not all that great. I can still reach him with my leg. Now we'll take a look at the opponent with a little bit longer weapon and see that the kick can still reach. So I won't move, so swing slowly here, right there. So he's stepping in, and you can see I'm well within the opponent's strike range. Stay right there. I'm going to push drag back out of range so he completes, and I can still land my front kick and my heel palm strike. What's great is that it really works against a variety of attacks, club attacks. If the opponent happens to already have his right foot forward and he's swinging, it still works. If he has it in his left hand and his left foot forward, and it happens to be a backhanded swing, I can still dodge and kick and heel palm strike. And of course, if I can control the weapon at any point along the way here, that's great. But really what's going to end the fight is me breaking his rib cage with the front kick and landing a heel palm strike to the temple. So there you have it for thrusting salute.